I'd like to welcome everybody today to the meeting of the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee. First, I'd like to introduce the top table. On my far left here we have Councillor Sheila McCole, who's the Vice Convener. Online we have Jack Welsh, the Vice Convener also. Barbara Renton to my immediate left here is Executive Director of Communities, and Adam Taylor from Committee Services. Can I ask Adam, can you affirm apologies received and do a roll call, please?
Yep, thanks, Convener. We've had no formal apologies submitted this morning, so I'll just quickly run through the members who are joining us in the chambers and then ask those online to confirm that they're actually in the meeting. So joining us this morning in the chambers, we have Bailey Ahern, Councillor Peter Barrett, Councillor Braun, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Frampton, Councillor Cagalli, Councillor Leishman, Councillor McPherson, Councillor McCall, yourself, Bailey McLaren and Councillor Smith. If I can just ask Councillor Brock to confirm whether you're in the meeting.
Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Morning, Adam. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Welsh.
Yes, I can confirm I'm here.
Thank you. That's everybody, Convener.
Can I remind councillors and officers joining us virtually to actually use the chat box online to indicate that you'd like to contribute to the meeting. Before we consider the main items of business on the agenda this morning, I would just like to congratulate Andrew White, our Care and Repairs Coordinator, who was recognised at the Scottish Empty Homes Conference last week. The Empty Homes Awards recognise the efforts of individuals and private and public organisations which have helped bring more than 8,000 empty homes back into use since 2010. Andrew, who shortly will be retiring, lucky man, was given a special recognition award. During his time in Perth and Kinross, Andrew's work with local landlords and private owners has helped to bring 183 empty homes back into use for affordable rent using the Council's Empty Homes Initiative grant scheme, which he administers. Another 19 projects are currently in the pipeline, and if we make him work hard enough, he should complete these by the time he retires, and breaking the 200 homes mark. And it's a well-deserved retirement if he achieves that. Andrew also picked up a nomination in the category of best use of empty homes to create social affordable housing for his work in Perth High Street. And also Caroline Doherty from the service was also nominated for the Rising Star category. So I'd like to give congratulations from this committee to both Andrew and Caroline for the tireless efforts and hard work, and obviously very good work that they do for this council. Do we have any declarations of interest for the items on the agenda today? I see no declarations of interest, and there's nothing coming through online. Can we agree the minutes of the previous meeting? So item 4 on our agenda is outstanding business statement. Can I ask if there's any questions regarding the outstanding business statement? Can we note the outstanding business statement and agree to remove completed actions from the statement?
Agreed.
So item 5 on our agenda is a presentation from the Road Safety and Road Crime. I will hand over to both Station Commander Joe Fitzpatrick from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Inspector Greg Burns from the Police Scotland Road Policing Unit, who will deliver their presentation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to committee members. My name's Joe Fitzpatrick, so I'm with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and I am delighted to be making a presentation this morning on road safety overview. Can I just check, first of all, that everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, it sounded nice in the chamber.
That's great, thanks. Okay, yeah, this is a joint presentation, myself first and then Police Scotland with Greg Burns delivering after me. So this is basically from the kind of SFRS perspective, and it's basically road safety overview of Perth and Kinross council area. Could I have the next slide, please? So just in terms of stats, we've tried to avoid making this too stats heavy, and so we've basically taken the stats and transferred this to a graphic for you. So we selected 2022 from the stats perspective, and across the Perth and Kinross area, you'll see that SFRS attended 91 RTCs. Now, that's not going to be the total RTCs in the area because the SFRS don't attend all RTCs. So these are the ones that are purely the ones that the SFRS have attended. And you'll see in that, the of that 91, unfortunately, there's 6 fatalities out of those 91 RTCs, casualties in the order of 44. And you'll see a definite emphasis on the distribution of that. It tends to be the faster trunk roads and motorway roads where these casualties and fatalities are occurring. And that's very important from the point of view of our focus on activities that we now pursue. Could I have the next slide, please? So it's very much about partnership working. The 3 key elements to that are the Road Safety Framework Local Partnership Forum North, which is basically a much more strategic group looking at strategic interventions. There's then the Tayside Road Safety Forum, which is more localised down to the city region scale of things, and then the group which the SFRS participates in most actively, although we are on the Tayside Road Safety Forum as well, is the Perth and Kinross Road Safety Partnership. And basically we all work around delivering the road safety framework to 2030, and within that there are annual delivery plans, and the last annual delivery plan was the 2021-2022, and it has a number of outcomes specified within it, which we try and tailor our activities to. Could I have the next slide, please? So focusing in on the Perth and Kinross Road Safety Partnership, the membership is, I've listed a few of the members there. There are more members, and the hope, as you'll see from the remit below, it's all about sharing ideas. It's all about getting together and having a discussion forum. So it's in terms of identifying opportunities to develop projects. As I say, the forum provides a mechanism for discussion and new ideas. It also provides governance for actions, projects and programmes of work. And we're also there to provide updates to Perth and Kinross Council on this. Could I have the next slide, please? So the type of work that we do get involved in, and I have to stress, this is the partnership perspective. This isn't all SFRS. So this is the type of work that we will get involved in terms of road safety measures that can be introduced. There's physical measures that can be introduced, and we're all familiar with them. You know, road narrowing, you can see a slide there with the bus stop. There's the chicanes that you can see there, and also speed cushions. That's the type of work that the road service can introduce. Vehicle activated signage, that's a key thing. So that helps in reducing speed, which is one of the framework requirements, and also the very familiar pop-up policeman, which is something that can be done more immediately. Physical measures such as road narrowing and speed cushions can take a while to introduce. If there's an identified problem and we're trying to respond to a specific community request, the pop-up policeman is an option. Could we have the next slide, please? So moving on in terms of road safety measures to the kind of trunk road scale of things. So there's fixed camera units on the trunk roads that you'll all be aware of. There's also the mobile safety camera units, which is you'll all be very familiar with, and the group will meet. And one of the discussions we will have is, you know, looking at those stats that were on the first page there. Where are the hotspots? Where do we need to position that van? Where is it going to have most effect in terms of reducing casualties, reducing RTCs, slowing vehicles down, and improving safety? So that's basically your RTC black spots. Now, also at RTC Black Sports, there's other interventions we can take, such as the gantry signage there, the roadside signage, and we've got specific messages which we're delivering on that, and these messages are tailored to an assessment of why accidents have happened. Typically on the A9, accidents are happening because people are tired. They're also perhaps not used to driving on that side of the road, so it's a reminder to drive on the left-hand side of the road. Also, a lot of the issues arise when we get to the single carriageway and there's unsafe overtaking manoeuvres because people are getting frustrated. So that's another message we put out on that. And obviously there's the more strategic level trunk roads initiative where vehicles, the HGVs have been increased to 50 miles per hour as a trial, and that trial evaluations is proven that it's been a success. One of these things where, ironically, increasing a vehicle's speed has improved safety. Could I have the next slide, please? So it goes all the way back down to the actual design of our towns, and you know, Perth is to be credited with, you know, a prime example of this, which actually is featured within the Scottish Government's Designing Streets guidance, and you'll see that the examples there. So the top picture there, that's a traditional format. You've got your gridiron road with strict demarcation between pedestrians and vehicles. On-road vehicle parking, lots of hazards there, lots of issues that we could design out. So, and then we've got the example of the Muirton traffic calming scheme that has been introduced, and you can see a picture of the type of physical road safety measures designed in right from the start, so that it's shared surfaces. There's class 4 roadways there. The vehicles are away from parking in the street. Okay, demand for parking does increase, so there is an element of that, but it's about designing these issues out at an early stage. Could I have the next slide, please? So in terms of SFRS in particular, our key focus in terms of the pillars under the framework is education. If we can tackle the education side of things and improve people's perception of the dangers of being on the road and the contribution they can make to improving safety, that's half the battle. So our community action team have been working alongside Police Scotland traffic officers to deliver a young driver scheme. That should be called new driver scheme. Apologies for the typo in there. So it's basically targeting at 16 to 24-year-olds. And I'll go on to discuss exactly what that is, but it's basically a replacement of the former Safe Drive Stay Alive initiative, which members were more likely to be aware of. So moving on to the next slide, please. So working in partnership with the Safer Communities team in Police Scotland, we've recently attended St John's Academy as part of a pilot programme to visit all high schools within Perth and Kinross. The SFRS, there's two aspects to it. There's the Police Scotland will deliver an aspect of that, and I know that PC Burns will basically go on to introduce that as part of his delivery. So from the SFRS input side of things, we've got virtual reality goggles, and these are designed to give the S5, S6 students at high schools an immersive experience in basically the hazards and risks associated with various scenarios and perspectives. It's a really high quality thing. We're getting really good positive feedback from the pupils on their improved awareness of, you know, driver safety, road safety. We're looking to expand this as well, with the aim to extend it to first-year apprentices and local firms. And this is at its early stages. We're currently in discussion with SIDE, who have agreed to enlist within this programme. The intention is to roll this out to council apprentices as well. Could we have the next slide, please? So in terms of our direct interventions, we've recently been able to upskill and up-resource our volunteer stations, the 3 volunteer stations at Carmichael, Kinlochranach and Glenshee. They now have a full RTC capability. We're in the process of rolling out the training at the moment. The training for Carmichael has now been completed. Training for Kinlochranach will be happening over the next 2 weeks. It's a 4-day full RTC operators course, which leaves them being fully skilled up. Glenshee will be towards the summertime due to the training programme constraints that we're facing there. So this also gives us an opportunity on the A9 to increase resilience with an additional pump being there with RTC capability. That's improving our ability to respond to RTC incidents on that particularly high risk corridor, which I know will be very much in the members' focus. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions now or wait until after.
I think we'll take questions of both presentations at the same time. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Inspector Burns, are you ready?
Yes, absolutely ready. Thank you. If you the presentation, I'll appreciate it. Yeah, good morning. I'm Greg Burns of the Road Policing Unit, head of Road Policing for Tayside Division at this point in time. A lot of the areas I'm going to be speaking on is going to cover what Joe's just spoke about, and that just, I suppose, highlights the partnership working there. It's obviously effective and it's the way it goes on. Overall, for Perth and Kinross, it's been fairly positive. I think from the figures there, clearly the target in line with Scottish Government is to have no fatalities on the road. That's the overall goal. I appreciate the road deaths here say 75% increase, which sends shivers down your spine. However, given that the numbers are so low, any fluctuation, either increase or decrease, shows a big percentage gain or decrease. Year to date, Perth and Kinross have had 8 fatalities, 4 for the period. I suppose Q3 it was under review, including a fatal at Dunkeld. I suppose going back to touching what Joe, fire service colleague, said there, we've had 3 foreign driver fatalities 2022. There's a lot of work ongoing just now with Scottish Government, Road Safety Scotland and hire car companies to obviously try and I suppose mitigate this. There's a launch of the Operation Drive on the Left, which is going to launch on the 21st of March at the Road Safety Scotland seminar in Edinburgh. Michael McDonagh will lead that from Road Safety Scotland. Moving on to the injury RTCs, you can see there again they're up 17%. And again, the numbers are low, so as soon as you see an increase, the percentage fluctuates quite highly. Positively, we've got a 33% reduction in children seriously injured in road collisions, which is really positive. And moving on to speeding, 59% decrease. This is attributable to a number of things: increased visibility in the road from Chief Inspector Leonard's team, my own team, the safety camera unit. And also, I suppose may have an impact is the cost of living crisis. You know, in the way people drive, cost of fuel, etc., is going to have an impact on that. Again, positively, we have a 24% decrease in drug driving, which is extremely positive. The drug wipes are proving very, very effective, which is obviously getting the message out there. And lastly, for this slide, a 22% reduction in careless driving, which is again exceptionally positive for Perth and Kinross across the board. If I could have the next slide, please. Just touching on a couple of things that Joe's already said there. Some really good partnership working across Perth and Kinross and Tayside as a whole. The first thing up there, we've got Tayside Road Safety Forum. We will link in with our divisional colleagues, our fire service colleagues, local authority and a number of other partners across that overarching partnership. We have rider refinement, which is run out of Perth just now. Rider refinement is an opportunity for attendees to come and go out on a motorcycle with police bikes, linked in with ROSPA and IAM, and get some feedback in their riding. Last year we ran eight events from Perth with 96 attendees. The programme was evaluated by Robert Gordon University given the revamp, and it got some excellent feedback from that. As such, there's plans to roll rider refinement out to the west and the east of the country, to probably based out of National Motorcycle Unit in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Moving on there, we've got driver engagement north. This is I suppose, an initiative to look at older drivers. It gives an opportunity for older drivers to try the simulator, which is funded by Road Safety Scotland. There's plans to get more simulators out there. It gives, I suppose, families as well an opportunity to speak with police in respect of driving, in respect of concerns for elderly people, you know, the mum or dad. It's maybe sensitive conversations. And it's an opportunity for us to get the message out there, how we go about either making it safer on the road or you know, trying to get their licence, maybe, I suppose, surrendered is the best way forward. But it's a really good engagement opportunity. We've got the safety camera unit, go to that, work closely with DVLE as well, and also local doctors as well who work into that. In Perth so far this year, we've held events at Bankfoot Visitor Centre, Dobbies and Brewer, which have all been extremely positive and very well received. Moving on to something Joe's already touched on, the new driver scheme. This is obviously joint working with our fire service colleagues, the local authority. We're currently working a delivery plan for Perth as a pilot there in St John's. The problem with this is that unlike Safe Drive Stay Alive, which captured a significant audience, this is designed at smaller audiences, so the demand is always going to outweigh the supply. So we're looking at a delivery plan, how we're going to get across to the schools and obviously some engineers, and we've delivered that across Angus to some apprentices as well. It's been very well received, and again, it's received very good evaluation, which is good. Moving on to the last thing on there is Operation Close Pass. This is something that's really prevalent and across Tayside. All local commanders want this in their area. We work closely with Chief Inspector Leonard's team to get the cyclists. We go out there and we promote road safety, cooperative space, you know, sharing of the road. And again, we've run that a couple of times in Perth and across Tayside as a whole. It always receives really mixed feedback. We put it on Facebook, social media, and it becomes, as I say, it's one of these contentious issues between drivers and cyclists, but we're trying to break down the barriers and promote, I suppose, cooperative use of the road space there. If we can move on to the next slide, please, that'd be ideal. I think just looking at some stats here, it's important to mention at this point in time, these stats relate to Tayside, not Perth and Kinross as a whole at this point in time. I think that the main thing to get out here, you know, that the speeding you see is dropped, decreased in respect of detection there. However, we've got 14,000, just over 14,000 vehicles stopped by road police officers alone, which tells me the productivity is excellent out there. That's actually increased from the same period last year. We were just over 12,500 vehicles stopped. Again, since COVID, breath testing has increased significantly, and we've got the drug wipes here, which are really, really effective in how we go about it. They're proven really positive, and we obviously put them on social media whenever we can to promote what we have there. Road police officers are concentrating on the fatal five, which are your dangerous driving, your careless driving, seatbelts, drink drug driving, mobile phones and speedings. You'll find road police officers obviously work out of Perth. However, they're in lots and lots of the areas, the towns, carrying out patrols within Perth, ensuring we can enforce these, obviously through education, enforcement and other measures we have, any way to influence driver behaviour. As my fire service colleague Joe's obviously touched on already, the A9 is a bit of a, I suppose, contentious issue just now in respect to its statute of local government and Scottish Government. As such, we've had a couple of, obviously, fatalities on there for our stretch of the road in Perth. We've increased daily patrols on there and put dedicated patrols on between 7 and 8 o'clock at night. Now, that's based on KSI, which is killed and seriously injured analytical data. This is when the accidents are happening. And I would say for 3 of our fatalities, which were foreign drivers, it's actually, as Joe said, down to either, you know, falling asleep or been confused with the roadway. There is work ongoing with that with Scottish Government, Road Safety Scotland, to obviously try and mitigate that and get the message out there. In relation specifically to the A9, between October 22 and the 31st of January 23, there was a little over 1,100 vehicles stopped in the A9, which is really positive for providing a high visibility patrol. Chances are if you drive between Perth and Inverness, you'll see at least 2-3 patrol cars on there, which is obviously providing that reassurance and high visibility patrol on there. If you can move on to the last slide, please. So lastly here, it's just outlining a couple of the campaigns road policing have carried out nationally and obviously within Perth. You know, October 22, Tyre Safety Week, which is obviously focusing on the wellness of your tyres, you know, how giving advice about that. Fatal 5 speeding operation, which is pertinent to what we're trying to achieve in respect of safety. Motorcycle safety campaign, which comes to an end in October. It runs from April to October and linked in with rider refinement. And obviously the link in there, getting ready for winter. Now that normally comprises of stop checks within the towns, engagement with locals, giving them some advice about what, you know, the wipers, the tyres, the driving. A big thing for us through the winter is scraping their windscreens. You know, folk drive off without having the windscreens properly cleared, which obviously is a contributing factor towards accidents. Moving into November, shall I say, we've got Operation Drive Insured, which focuses on vehicles insured. With the technology we have these days with the NPRs and the cars, it's quite easy to see which car's insured and which car's not. It's very, very accurate. And obviously Brake Safety Week, which we have here, we concentrated on the A9, given the fatalities we had down there, and we put additional patrols up there and stopping vehicles and obviously high visibility. Moving into December 2022, we're concentrating on festive drug drive campaigns, which is the same every year. Basically patrols about early mornings, stopping cars, you know, stopping folk at night. The message is normally spread wide. You know, we stop one car and somebody will go somewhere and they'll speak to somebody else, and the message is out there, they're stopping and breathalyzing folk for all the right reasons there. I think that concludes the presentation. I hope there wasn't too much overlap there with our fire service colleagues, and I'm more than happy to take any questions along with our fire service colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector Burns. And we'll start with questions from Billy Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question's on the young driver scheme, which is obviously the change from the Safe Drive Stay Alive. Do we have, and I know this is a difficult question because it's been asked before about the success. How do you measure the success of Safe Drive Stay Alive? Because obviously the young people that go through that go out and you don't really follow up, or it's very, very difficult to follow up on those drivers that have been through. But it was really hard, had a hard impact, and definitely stayed on people's minds, and certainly some of the teachers that went in there, the sessions I was at, it impacted them as well. Do you think the new scheme with the virtual reality goggles is going to have the same impact to the drivers as the Safe Drive Stay Alive?
I'm happy to take that one, Joe, if you're all right with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Safe Drive Stay Alive, the evaluation on that, they did actually follow some students through that. It didn't have the effect long term, the longevity of the actual impact wasn't there. It was a hard hitting thing at the time, and if you've probably seen it, with, you know, people in floods of tears, which they're trying to move away from now in respect to that, because they're finding that the long term effects of that wasn't there. When they went back and spoke to a couple of the attendees of Safe Drive Stay Alive, the most memorable part was the sort of music at the start, the group mentality of actually attending that, and the message has actually been lost in that. The reassurance with, I suppose, the positive thing with Safe Drive Stay Alive was you could capture a great number of people at one time. You know, they could fill the Caird Hall, we could go in there with our fire service colleagues, deliver it, and have a really good impact on the day. But the long-term effect of that was not there. And I think a good example of that being is that N Division, Northern Division, never ever hosted Safe Drive Stay Alive. However, they had less fatalities on the roads in respect to young drivers than we did in a certain period of time, which was monitored. So that was some of the factors that has obviously moved away from Safe Drive Stay Alive. The new driver scheme has obviously come out in Ayrshire, and it was pioneered by Chief Inspector Napier from G Division. Now that's been evaluated in the first year. It captures smaller amount of audiences in respect of what we have there, but the engagement's far more, the taking away from it's far more, and it's still really impactful. You know, it's a really good impactful presentation that hopefully they'll follow folk through. They've taken the presentation and obviously get the effects going forward as well, and that will be evaluated as well. But going forward, we're hoping to increase the numbers with the new driver scheme, because that is obviously supply is the demand is always going to outweigh the supply. But hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Bailey McLaren.
Yeah, thank you. My question is related to the training of the fire service in, you pointed out, Kirkmichael area. Will Dunkeld be included in this training programme for that fire station?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor. Yeah, so the service, Dunkeld are already fully RTCO trained. The Dunkeld is a retained status station, and the Kirkmichael, Glenshee and Kinlochrannoch are volunteer status stations. So it was a gap that we identified, and we're very much bringing up our volunteer stations to the same standard, because there's a clear resilience advantage in addressing that specific risk on the A9 corridor. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you for that background information as well. Thank you.
Bailey Brock.
Hello, I've got a few, well, I had 4 questions, but one's already been answered because Bailey Ahern had asked the one, and yes, I one, the stay alive one. However, one of the other questions I want to ask is over the mobile safety camera units, and I just wondered how many do we have within our Perth and Kinross? How many of these units do we have that could be delivered on certain sites or roundabout?
I can't give you exact numbers if I'm being honest with you, but the deploy from Dundee, the problem you have with the safety camera unit is there's a number of tests they have to go through before they can actually deploy in a site. Obviously, to meet the criteria to deploy in a site, they can't just deploy wherever they feel like. There is a number of temporary locations they use, and it's based on, again, as I said earlier on, killed and seriously injured data is where it's best deployed. So if they've sat, for example, if you're familiar with obviously Perth and Kinross, just over the Fratton Bridge, if there's a reduction in fatalities or killed and seriously injured on that road, they'll review the data at the end of the year and make a determination as to whether they redeploy there or not. But the sites are continually updated and obviously monitored based on analytical data.
Okay, thank you for that. And then the other question I have is regarding the full-time, well, the retained stations actually, because in my area we've got a retained station, and I just wondered if the creep area is well covered at this moment in time with retained officers.
Hello, Councillor. Yes, very much so. There's a retained station at Creef, and there's also a retained station at Comrie. There's backup stations at Auchterarder, obviously Perth as well. So yeah, it's covered and fully trained and fully kitted out for RTC response.
That's super, thanks. And then my last question is probably to the police. I noticed that you had campaigns for motorcycles, and I just wondered if you've had a campaign for the bike users, bicycles, because often I get complaints from constituents about them being on pavements. So I just wondered if anything like this has been raised regarding the cyclists.
Yeah, I think that's raised. It's not just a localised complaint. That's something that's raised nationally with us. Road policing hold what's called a tactical options working group, which is held on a quarterly basis. Cycle Law Scotland attend that, and we link in with themselves. And obviously they promote safe cycling, and they've got obviously social media outlets that they put the message out there and try to obviously leave it that. But obviously, in the local term, if obviously officers see something like that, they'll challenge it at the time.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, convener. That's my questions all been answered.
Thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, convener. My question was to a point that was raised in Joseph's report about the RTAs, the road traffic accidents, that they appear to be focused on the sort of main roads, the fastest roads. You sort of alluded to the fact that the risk factors seem to be down to things like tiredness and a lack of understanding. I just wondered, in the statistics, do you differentiate those drivers that come out with Perth and Kinross? It might be typically referred to as tourists who don't have the benefit of local knowledge, and in terms of sort of differentiating that in the statistics in terms of those drivers involved. Thank you.
Hello, Councillor. Yeah, the stats are basically a total of fatalities and casualties. However, whenever an accident occurs, there's a lot of investigation into exactly why that accident has occurred. There's no specific focus on accidents occurring due to vehicle drivers from abroad, but that will get picked up as part of the investigation post-crash. So yeah, and it could be down to tiredness, it could be down to just unfamiliarity with the roadway, going from a dual carriageway to single carriageway. So yeah, it's captured within that overall investigation.
Thank you. So you could actually provide us a percentage of those drivers that come outside with Perth and Kinross, could you?
Yes, that figure could be extrapolated. For example, those the double fatality at Dunkeld late last year, well, towards the end of the summer last year, that was down to 2 people from Brazil. So yeah, I mean, that could be extrapolated out.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's an important issue. We have a transient sort of berry picking, fruit picking sort of workforce that tend to come from Eastern Europe, and obviously, should there be any spikes in this fatality of sort of road traffic accidents related to their driving, obviously there'd be quite an easy group of people to target, because they all tend to live in the same farm site and therefore easier to catch and take forward.
Thanks, convener. I have 3 questions, but one's pretty much been asked by Councillor Macpherson already, but I'll just touch on another point there, which we didn't come across, is we get a lot of tourists here from abroad. Do we get many accidents because they're driving on the wrong side of the road? I've seen it happen several times where I am, and I just wondered, is that a cause of accidents?
Yes, there's been I think that the 3 we've had this year, I think I would agree with Joe, is down to fatigue. And that's basically down to the positioning and the collision investigation reports we have had there. We have had a number of foreign drivers driving the wrong side of the road, which have caused collisions, not so much in Perth and Kinross area, further north. And whether that's down to possibly just switching off for a moment, going back to where you normally drive, whatever it may be, there's a lot of factors that are going to be involved in that. That's directly linked in with the campaign I discussed earlier with Road Safety Scotland, which is called Operation Drive on the Left. Now that's going to launch, I think it's the 21st of March, and that's linked in with Scottish Government, Road Safety Scotland and hire company cars, which basically they're going to put videos on within the hire company area, if you want, that reinforces the message of driving on the left. They're going to hand out wristbands and possibly warning signs to remind you to drive on the left. This is all things going forward, but from your question, yes, there is contributing factors for driving the wrong side of the road.
Thank you. If I may ask another question, the next 2 questions are really for the police, and it was looking at the stats you put up, 59% drop in speeding and the drop in driving accidents. So obviously speeding is a contributing factor. And you mentioned when you stop people, educate and enforce. Should we now be looking at just enforce, so it gets the message home? Speeding is dangerous.
I think that's a very I think enforcement alone is obviously guidelines from a Lord Advocate that obviously we work to. I think for every driver we stop, there's a different set of circumstance. We'll always use discretion at some point. There's a number of measures we can use if we stop somebody speeding, depending on the severity of it. The camera vans are obviously slightly more focused in respect of what they do, but it's a different system, back office system they do. So what we suggest is that the officers out there will use their discretion whenever they stop someone for speeding, but the message of safety and driver behaviour will always be at the centre of the focus in respect of that stop. I think enforcement all the time would be is a tricky one because it's got to be discretionary, I feel.
Okay, one final question. It really was a thought and a comment perhaps from yourself. You mentioned one of the reasons that speeding has dropped is the cost of living and the cost of fuel. Another thought I had was, you know, if you're driving an ordinary petrol or diesel car, you speed around, you use up fuel rapidly, go to a petrol station, fill up in 5 minutes, you're back on the road and off you go again. But with a number of electric cars on the road now, that can't be done. It takes 20, 25, even 30 minutes to even top up your energy. So that could well be a hidden benefit of changing our cars to electric. I just wonder if you thought that might be true. It seems to be something there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think every workforce and every organisation has a number of electric cars now, and we all experience the same issues you're talking about. You know, I suppose, the restricted number of miles you can use the car for, and obviously the charging points, and obviously trying to conserve energy on it. So absolutely, that could very well be a possibility, and there's obviously going to be more electric cars going forward. So it's only going to be a bonus for road safety.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for your presentation, both of you. Thanks.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Convener, and thank you both for the presentation. Excuse me. My first question is fairly straightforward, I hope, and it's about statistics. I'm just wondering if you've got an age demographic profile of drivers involved in road traffic accidents.
Road traffic accidents or road traffic fatalities, sorry.
Road traffic collisions.
We will have, sorry, carry on, Joe, if you've got that. No, as I say, we will have that somewhere in the back office. It's certainly not something I put my finger in now, but I could certainly get that for you if you wanted it.
Thank you. The reason I ask is I know you've got particular programs towards very young drivers and perhaps some older drivers who I think you suggested might be persuaded to give up their license. But my father used to be a driving instructor, and so quite a number of his customers were people, very often women, who hadn't driven for years because there was a primary driver in the house, and they were coming back onto the roads, and so they took some lessons to really reacquaint themselves. So I don't know if that's still a thing or not, because it was some time ago, but I'm just wondering if you're doing any work with the driving school associations to see if there's something that can be done if people do come to driving instructors looking for additional lessons or refresher courses, whether or not there's something that could be done to target that kind of demographic. They tend not to be as old as the people who might be in the cohort that might be persuaded to give up their driving license, but they're still active and perhaps haven't driven for some time. So hence my reason about the age demographics as well, because I'm just wondering if there's any sort of correlation between those two things. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, what I would say is that you make a very valid point there. I mean, there's some older drivers on the road, and what's the definition of an older driver? But there's some really good older drivers out there, some really good younger drivers out there. The demographic is wide and vast, and every situation is different depending on a number of factors. You know, some can be medical, some can be just not very good at it. I know there was some work done with driving schools previously. I know Fife run a programme, if you want, in respect of refreshing driving standards, as it were. There's nothing ongoing in Perth and Kinross at this point in time. However, what I will say is that through the campaign calendar, the road policing that's put out there on a yearly basis, we try and hit all demographics, whether it be younger drivers, vulnerable road users, to ensure we get the message out there for road safety as a whole, rather than just focusing on one age group. The problem we have is older road users and younger road users. The statistics say in the last wee while is that obviously they're the most at risk at this point in time. Hence why there's some focus on them. However, over the piece of the year, we certainly try and focus on all demographics there.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, convener. I have just one question. Bailey Brock asked about mobile safety units. I'd like to ask about average speed cameras. Obviously, in Perth and Kinross, they exist both north and south of Perth on the A9. In Stirling and Argyll and Bute, they exist on the A85, between Lixtoe, Crianlarich and Tyndrum, but not in Perth and Kinross. So could I just ask both Mr Fitzpatrick and Inspector Burns, have you made any representations to Transport Scotland who decide on where average speed cameras will apply, and just how effective do you think they are as a measure in changing driver behaviour?
Thank you for that, Councillor Donaldson. Yeah, we do participate in the more strategic level local partnership north for road safety, which is very much led by the Trunk Roads Authority. That within that forum, that's where that level of discussion will take place, and we will make a contribution at that level. They have a risk-based model for the introduction of these schemes. As you can imagine, they are focused on addressing the risk within the capacities that they have. And at the moment, the extent of what has been rolled out in Perth and Kinross has arisen from that, but it is an ongoing process. And that's certainly something that we can feed into, and there is a mechanism for us to do that.
Could I then just say, I have obviously in terms of local interest, I've raised this a couple of times in respect for the A85 between Crieff and Comrie and St Fillan's, and it's something that will get raised again. But just in general, leave aside the local aspect, do you think it's got an effective measure? And also it may mean that it reduces the number of mobile safety units you have to deploy in specific areas. Just how effective can it be in changing driver behaviour?
I think coming in there, the average cameras have proved very, very effective.
You went on to meet Inspector McGregor.
Apologies. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So I say you make a very valid point there. They're very, very effective. Some of the roads you mentioned, Lixtoe Road especially, were very retro for motorcycles. That the average cameras introduction is certainly reduced that, mitigated that problem up there. Same as what Joe said there, it's obviously discussed at a very high level in respect of average cameras and where they go and where they're obviously placed and funding, etc. I have also asked the question in respect to the 85, the A93 especially, because we got a number of complaints, especially over the summer period with motorcycles and in cars as well, not to mention. But they're very, very effective, and I think the roads have been put on. We look at the M90, the A90, the A9, it's all improved, obviously, driver behaviour, and folk are far more aware and reducing their speed in respect to that. So yes, they are very effective.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Welsh.
Thank you both for your presentations. It's really insightful, and obviously as much as we can do to reduce these is really important. One of the most vulnerable sort of groups on the road are actually cyclists, and you know, certainly as a local authority council, we're very much trying to encourage activity, wellness strategies to support, for example, cycling amongst other things. The Close Pass initiative, I think, is a fantastic opportunity to enhance road safety, particularly for this group. My particular question is, are you able to receive video footage from, for example, helmet-mounted cameras from cyclists? How is this then used? And do you have any feedback on any sort of successful follow-ups from such footage in the Perth and Kinross area? Thank you.
I think Close Pass is an exceptionally good tool. It raises awareness, and as I said before, it promotes the idea is to promote cooperative use of the road space. We do receive some footage from dash cams, from helmet cams, which highlight issues, and obviously we will investigate that to the best of the ability. The problem we have normally with the dash cam is it's a single witness, and we've obviously got the dash cam there to look at it. So it becomes slightly problematic in the investigation side of it, but it's certainly looked at, and we take all evidence we have in respect of following the investigation up. Close Pass, as I say, it's well received anyway we do it. It's quite resource intensive to do it, but it gets out the message, and we obviously do it in, I suppose, roads, the 85, roads that we see cyclists on a lot in the town, and generally we get some really good results for that and some really positive feedback.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess I would be keen to sort of try and see if I'm aware that prosecutions have been held in other local authorities, and I take your point about sort of single witness, but obviously there are mechanisms to overcome that. And but I appreciate your reply, but I think it's an area that we can probably try and do maybe a wee bit more in. Thank you.
Councillor Leishman.
Thanks very much, convener, and thank you both for your presentations. It's been very, very interesting. My question is really for Inspector Burns. We've heard in previous meetings from colleagues of yours that Police Scotland are having staffing issues at the minute across the service. I'm just curious as to how staffing levels are for your road safety team in Perth and Kinross, and how is it, if it is at all, that your staffing levels impacting on what you do in road safety? Thank you.
Obviously, staffing levels and resourcing issues is an issue for every area of business, no matter if it's a police or fire service. It's always going to be with funding the way it is. What I would say for Tayside Division, we're very well resourced in respect to what we have, and we deal with as many, obviously, instances as we can in respect of reports, whatever it might be. As you'll see from the statistics I've put out there, we've stopped over 14,000 cars this year, which is an incredible amount of cars and an incredible amount of engagement, and obviously enforcement there. So I'm very satisfied with what I have just now. I think they do an excellent job. We obviously link in with Tom's team. The partnership working is incredibly important as well, because that obviously improves the footprint of what we have. And obviously we do that over the priority routes we have and any enforcement days we have, which makes the visibility essentially better. So no, in respect to resourcing, very happy with what we have, and I think we do a good job of where we are. I don't know if Tom wants to go on top of that.
Yeah, no, Greg, I think just touching on what you said there, certainly we'll have the Divisional Roads Policing Unit in Tayside, but as part of Police Scotland, we're able to extend into that wider network with Divisional Road Policing Unit and other specialist assets right across the country, and can bring them in when required. But the key for me is very much the partnership working between our local policing units, Greg's team, and the wider partnership with Joe and his team and local authority as well. So through that forum, I'm quite happy that the resourcing that we have in place is sufficient, and that we do have access to other assets should they be required.
Thank you very much. I've got one more question coming from Councillor Smith. I'm now going to go back to people who have indicated multiple questions. It was my intention to take one question from members at a time, and such a broad subject, it's easy to ask other people's questions, and I want to give everybody a chance to at least be able to ask something. I've asked Adam to put that into my process note for the future, so that I remind people of that at the beginning of the committee. It just gives everybody the chance to ask questions. Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much for the presentation. My question is related to your statistics regarding the decrease in the drug driving. Now, I find this quite strange because I think nationally, I think you might know it's going up. I do a lot of walking on the A85, first for getting my papers and two for picking up rubbish, etc. And someone who's never seen a drug or never taken a drug and never will take a drug, I know the sweet smell of a certain drug. And I can assure you that on many, many occasions going past, I say, oh, there's another one and there's another one. Could you tell me, please, do you think there's enough publicity going on and you would think we need to be more aware of this drug driving problem? Thank you.
Yeah, totally take your point on board, and I've experienced the same thing when I'm off duty, so I'm with you on that one. What I would suggest is the media campaigns we put out there, both for the festive safety campaign and the summer drink drive or summer drug drive campaign, are obviously national. They go out there, they try to get the message across that it's unacceptable now. That doesn't stop folk from doing it, and that's the exact same as drink driving. The ideal would be to, totally remove it from the, I suppose, from the roads. However, that's not always going to be possible, and we're realistic about that. What I will say is, if a patrol car or Tom's team or whoever it might be is in a position we smell something like that or we stop something like that, I can assure you a drug wipe will be used. They're very, very effective and they're very, very quick, and obviously send the results off to the lab, and the driver will be brought to prosecution. So I would give you some reassurance that certainly we stop, and if there's any indication or suggestion there's drugs on board or the driver's under the influence in any way, shape or form, they will be breathalyzed or drug wiped. So I hope that gives you a wee bit of reassurance there.
It certainly does, and I'll just watch I don't get too high when I'm smelling it going on the road. Thank you.
And I think Councillor Smith, as a pharmacist, I need to sort of highlight to members of the public that even medicines prescribed by your own GP may inhibit your ability to operate machinery, and the labels that you get from your chemist should indicate that. Some analgesias, muscle relaxants and sleeping pills are all things that you probably shouldn't operate machinery if affected by them. So it's that careful and that judgment when you're going to drive a car, that are you fully within your senses to do it safely, and I think that's important also from the points that you've just raised. Bailey Ahem.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is on something that Inspector Burns just touched on very briefly in his presentation, and that's the dualling of the A9. Can I just ask about the fatalities that are there? I don't know whether the majority were on whether it's a single lane or whether it was on areas that have actually been dualled. And do you think that dualling actually helps reducing accidents? Because where you have a dual carriageway, you tend to find drivers increase their speed. I know we've got the average speed cameras, but you then turn into a different aspect of accidents through speeding. And when you have an accident through speeding, the tendency to have a fatality increases as well. So I just wonder, where the fatalities were they on single or dual carriageway, and whether you think that the dualling all the way up will actually decrease the accidents?
Yeah, firstly, to your first point in the question, I don't think any, just from quick glance at the spreadsheet, I don't think any of the fatalities have been on the dual carriageway section. As my colleague from the fire service, Joe's just touched on, the Brazilian double fatal, which happened, I think it was October. The vehicle was leaving the dual carriageway on the single section carriageway, but I don't think there's been any fatalities on the actual dual carriageway section. The dual carriageway section, it separates, it gives you two lanes each direction, which is separated by an Armco barrier. So that takes away any conflict from oncoming vehicles, which is obviously going to be positive for road safety. You're not going to have that head-on impact. I'm not saying for 1 minute you wouldn't have fatalities in the dual carriageway section, possibly due to other factors. However, certainly from the stats this year, there's not been any on the dual carriageway section. Do I think it? I think it would, because it obviously separates cars. You've got an Armco barrier between us. We're still going to have drivers that have lapses in concentration or make mistakes and have a collision. Can I forecast if there's going to be a fatality? I can't, unfortunately. My own personal opinion is if we had a dual carriageway section all the way up, it would certainly reduce the likelihood of fatalities there.
Thank you, Bailey, and I agree with you completely that the dualling of the A9 is a hugely important infrastructure project within Perth and Kinross and Highland that needs to be expedited as soon as resources make that possible. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Yeah, my question again, A9 related. When the road is closed due to RTCs, serious RTCs, obviously the traffic that's on the A9 is dissipated to arterial routes, that being, I'm particularly talking about Dunkeld area. On one of the road closures last year, it caused almost gridlock in that whole area with the traffic going on to the arterial routes. HGVs, legitimate road users, but do you have a sort of suggested diversion routes that come up when these situations arise? Because it really did impact. I think it was the RTC, not the October one, the one prior to that, caused because it was at the height of summer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah, and I suppose in short, yes, we do. They're called SIDRs, Standard Incident Diversion Routes, which are implemented as and when we have a collision of some standing. The problem we have with implementing a SIDR or a Standard Diversion Route is that generally, I'm going to say that the Dunkeld fatality, because I was at that actually, the amount of traffic you have coming up to the actual collision site and that time was obviously peak time when it happened. You've got a backlog of maybe 10 miles there. Okay, now the Standard Instant Diversion Route for the A9 for HGVs is different from your cars, because obviously cars are able to go up round by Bank Foot and come out at the other end of the diversion. However, that's not suitable for HGVs. So the diversion route for the HGVs has to actually start at Broxden on the A9 to divert them up the M90 or the A90 to give them suitable clearance of bridges, etc., and not cause further chaos. The problem we have is at that point in time, certainly with Dunkeld, we had, I'm going to say 40 to 50 HGVs on that route already, which we have to call basically stack. We just put them in lane 1, which obviously minimises the amount of space we have to get other vehicles turned. What I would say is that the primary goal and as response is obviously saving lives at that point in time, getting to the accident itself with our colleagues in the fire service and getting folk out of vehicles and getting them to hospital as quickly as they can. We appreciate it causes distress for users of the road. It causes obviously inconvenience because they have to be turned round and put round these routes. We do try to do it as quickly as we can with our colleagues, it's either Bayer or the road operating company, and obviously our colleagues in the fire service. Sometimes it's not as quick as folk would like. But to answer to your first question, the Standard Incident Diversion Routes are held by Transport Scotland, and we do try to implement them as soon as we possibly can. But it's normally several miles before the collision, so we can give HGVs, etc., sufficient time to manoeuvre off the road. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Just a small addition, is that for the traffic, for the HGVs travelling south, do you have a stacking system for them?
Yes, we'll try to. The problem I had, again, using the Dunkells as an example, we have to stack them because it's not suitable to put them through Dunkeld. There's obviously a lot of smaller roads here. The A9 is not a great road to have a diversionary route because normally the diversion starts, as far up as Inverness or whatever it might be, and they go across the 96 and onto the A90. So normally we have to stack the lorries there. We haven't really got much option because there's insufficient room for them to turn, and it would be unsafe to put them through Dunkeld because of the weight and the volume of traffic. It just wouldn't cope.
Thank you. That's really helpful information.
Thank you, and thank you, Joe and Greg, for your presentations today. I think it was good to be able to focus on road safety and road crime, and I think we took as long questions on that as we would do with the full quarter reports. I think it was a useful use of our time. So thank you very much, gentlemen. I move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is. Oh, sorry, Councillor James, you have a comment.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, it was a comment. I don't have a question as such, because I think everything that could be asked has been asked. But I think Mr. or Inspector Burns just touched on it then, to be honest with you, where traffic is stopped and diverted for a reason. And, you know, you guys are damned if you do, damned if you don't. And you can be everybody's friend 1 minute, and by doing something like that, everybody's enemy in the same breath. However, I'd just like to say you do a fantastic job, and I feel safe anyway, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I will move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Perth and Kinross Local Police Plan for 2023 to 2026. Can I ask Area Commander Tom Leonard to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Convener. The Perth and Kinross Local Police Plan describes the main priorities for policing across the local area and was produced following extensive consultation with the public, partners and local authority. Previous drafts have been circulated to the committee and to the broader elected membership for Perth and Kinross. This local policing plan in its final form reflects this consultation and is now presented to the committee for approval and adoption for the 2023 to 2026 period.
Bailey, I heard you have a question.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to go to a subject I bring up all the time, and that's community policing. And I noticed that in there, in that report, communities mentioned quite a lot, but we still have an issue with the numbers of community policing, especially at the moment where we're losing them to 2 sites for going on point. And I just wondered what the feedback was on the survey with regards to the visibility and the numbers of community policing. And are we actually going to see an increase, or are we still going to remain at the really low numbers we've got at the moment?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor. I know it's a concern for yourself. In terms of community policing, I think it's probably quite helpful to recognise from the input that we had this morning that we actually deliver a wide range of policing within the community, both from traditional, what we would call community policing teams, but right across our uniformed response teams, roads policing units and other departments, including CID and PPU. Visibility is something that's been brought up in the surveys, not only the consultation survey, but other surveys that have been conducted by ourselves and as part of the work that we're currently doing in the Letham area. So there is a bit of work for us to do to try and increase the visibility and increase the awareness within the community about some of the services we are delivering. I can probably provide the reassurance that community policing remains absolutely a priority for ourselves as outlined in the plan, and my priority as we move through the period of the plan will to make sure that there is visible policing presence within our communities.
Thank you very much, and you're right. I mean, all the different divisions, all the different teams do a fantastic job, but it's I think the visible element tends to be the Bobby on the street. Thank you.
Councillor Kilgallie.
This might be a bit of a big one to ask you here, but I was wondering whether we could have a comment or potentially a report potentially brought back at some point in terms of the impact of the Unified Police Force on the things that Councillor Ahern just brought up. I know Councillors Brock and Donaldson, it's probably quite helpful that they're here because we were dealing with something in St Fillan's a while ago where people felt like they were quite far away from the police. And one of the things that people were bringing up to me at the time where they felt that the Unified Police Force might be a part of that. Whether we could have just a little verbal update or whether that's something bigger that I'm asking you to do, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. It probably ties back into that visibility of policing within the communities and just how we try and promote that. It's probably a bigger question. I'm quite happy to speak to you off table just to understand exactly, the type of information you're looking for, and we can certainly bring that back with hopefully some of the assurances. I'm aware of that particular issue around, I think there was some of the activity around last summer, but hopefully some of the action we've taken through Inspector Leslie McDonald and her team in South Perthshire will have provided some of the assurance to you, but I'm more than happy to catch you off table, Councillor, and I can perhaps bring something back to the wider committee in due course.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I was just wondering if we could find out a wee bit more about the Fearless programme in terms of tackling violence, And second question was related to progress being made in terms of collaboration and what percentage of the divisional estate is co-located with our partners. Do you have a baseline on that?
Yeah, in terms of the Fearless campaign, Councillor, if I can maybe come back to you in respect to that once I get a bit more information in terms of it myself. In terms of your second question around the co-location aspect, estates is very much something that we are looking at, and we are looking at that in conjunction with colleagues at Perth and Kinross Council as well. You'll be aware we have co-location currently within South Perthshire at Crieff Police Office. We also have some elements of our divisional establishment here. Our partnerships and preventions team are co-located with council colleagues in Safer Communities at St Martin's House. So the estate side is probably a longer term piece of work for ourselves, but very much a focus in the plan to look at how we do that in the longer term, in terms of not just co-location, but ensuring that the units who are co-located provide truly collaborative work in order to deliver both the policing plan, but also local plans as well.
Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the report. My question is about something that's not in the report. It's actually about custody arrangements in Perth City. A couple of years ago, the custody arrangements changed, I think partly because of the pandemic, where custody processing was being referred to Dundee. I think we were assured at the time that that was a measure of the time. So I'm just wondering if you can give us some sort of update on that and what the plans are for capacity and skills at Perth Police Station. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor McCall. Probably quite timely. It is something that we've been looking at, and from my point of view, having local officers travelling to Dundee for every arrest is not ideal, and it probably leads to some of the concerns that Councillor Ahern, etc., raised in terms of visibility. So we have been in consultation with our custody division, and we are launching a pilot which will start hopefully at the start of April to provide increased custody provision in Perth and Kinross. That will be an initial pilot period. The decision in custody will very much depend on the footfall through the custody centre, and obviously to justify the staffing levels and commitment, but I'm hopeful that will be a successful pilot and will provide enhanced custody provision in Perth and Kinross and reduce the number of times that officers are travelling through to Dundee and to other primary custody centres.
May I ask a supplementary?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I think it's really reassuring that you've kept an eye on the custody arrangements, and that you're being flexible. You're now trying something different to improve matters. I think that was what you promised when we first raised and discussed this during the last term, and it's good to see that you're keeping an eye on things and adapting where you need to adapt. I have no more questions, but I have a comment from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks very much, Convener. I just wanted to thank Chief Superintendent Tom Leonard for the work that he has done locally in terms of tackling hate crime and working with equalities groups across Perth and Kinross to provide reassurance to them. And it's really encouraging to see in the development of the next local police plan the creation of domestic abuse champions and hate crime champions. And if there's anything that we can do to help roll that out and support it from an equalities point of view, Tom, very happy to do that. Thank you.
That's appreciated, Councillor. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Rainey. Just a very quick comment to thank Chief Inspector Leonard and all his officers for the work they do to keep us all safe. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we approve the report? Great. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
So item 7 on our agenda, one of our most substantive papers I think that comes to this committee is the local housing strategy for 22-27. Can I ask Elaine Ritchie, the Senior Service Manager for Housing, to introduce the report, please? I think we have a short video to start with.
Adam, do you want to play the video?
Perth and Kinross Council is pleased to present the new 5-year local housing strategy, covering the period 2022 to 2027. Housing plays a vital role in meeting the needs of local people, communities and the economy. Giving people the right housing for them, in the right place, and at the right cost, vastly improves their life chances. Our new local housing strategy sets out the strategic vision, policies and plans that will enable the Council and our partners to deliver high-quality housing and services to meet the needs of local people. It also sets out the important contribution housing makes to improving health and well-being, creating connected and sustainable places, reducing climate change, supporting economic growth, and reducing poverty across Perth and Kinross, playing an important part in the development of the Perth and Kinross offer. The new local housing strategy builds on the progress of the local housing strategy for 2016 to 2021. It is an all-tenure strategy, with a focus on all housing market areas in Perth and Kinross, and will sit at the heart of all housing planning and activities in Perth and Kinross for the next 5 years. It is an ambitious strategy, setting out what homes and communities should look and feel like over the next 5 years. This includes delivering more homes, creating livable and sustainable places that are well designed, safe and connected, providing access to suitable, affordable and energy-efficient housing options for all, ensuring that homes meet people's individual needs and are well connected to local services, jobs and communities. The Local Housing Strategy 2022-27 is the result of close partnership working and consultation with local and national housing stakeholders, communities and partner organisations over the last 2 years. Their views have helped influence the development of priorities and outcomes, which will enable the Council and partners to deliver high-quality housing and housing services to meet the needs of local people in all types of housing. Our local housing strategy vision for 2022-27, co-produced with partners and stakeholders, is: everyone in Perth and Kinross has access to the right home, in the right place, at the right cost. To achieve this vision and realise our wider ambitions, 4 local housing strategy priorities have been defined. Priority 1, providing more affordable homes to support livable and sustainable communities. Partners and stakeholders co-produced a range of options and ideas to proactively address the challenges associated with providing more affordable homes to support livable communities in Perth and Kinross. These actions include maximising the development of social housing, delivering a diverse mix of property sizes with more accessible, adaptable homes. Seeking opportunities to deliver a wider range of affordable housing options, such as low-cost home ownership and affordable self-build across Perth and Kinross, and including rural areas and community-led projects. Developing an empty homes strategy, to bring empty properties back into use in areas where there is pressure on housing. generating more homes through brownfield development. Priority 2, providing a range of housing options that people can easily access, afford and keep. The local housing strategy aims to mitigate the impact of poverty and housing affordability on the ability of people to access suitable housing options. It sets out housing's role in improving housing choice, tackling child poverty. Key actions for this priority include continuing to develop and improve tailored debt advice and welfare assistance to households, maximizing financial inclusion. Developing a range of housing options that achieve a better match of households to homes. Increasing engagement with private landlords to increase awareness of funding options available to them. Improving and developing our sector-leading Home First approach to tackling homelessness. Continuing our work with partners to offer housing and support to refugees and asylum seekers. Priority 3, delivering homes for people with varying needs. The local housing strategy plays a significant role in improving public health in Perth and Kinross by setting the framework for delivering accessible homes and supported accommodation for people with particular needs. Actions for this priority include ensuring that planning policy, placemaking, and housing investment contribute to improved and sustainable homes, outdoor space, health, and well-being for people with varying needs. More effective prioritization and promotion of occupational therapy to support property adaptations for all housing tenures. Working in partnership to ensure future housing developments address barriers to employment and link to transport and childcare provision, with a focus on areas of deprivation and rural communities. Ensuring that a minimum of 10% of all affordable homes are built to be wheelchair accessible and adaptable. Continuing to work collaboratively to promote the benefits and increase awareness of technology within a housing setting. Priority 4, delivering quality homes with affordable warmth, zero emissions and smart technology. The local housing strategy has a role to play in enabling Perth and Kinross to meet the ambitious energy efficiency, climate change targets and housing quality targets set by the Scottish Government. Actions include supporting the implementation of the Perth and Kinross local heat and energy efficiency strategy, developing pilot projects that incorporate net zero planning across different housing sectors, including the retrofitting of energy-efficient heating and technology. Expanding the capacity of local energy and fuel poverty advice services, and improving the availability of information. Facilitating the rollout of low-cost, high-speed broadband into social housing in partnership with the private sector. Working with the Scottish Government and other agencies to improve digital infrastructure, particularly in rural communities. This is just a flavour of what is included in the new local housing strategy for 2022-27. As we continue our recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and deal with increasing cost of living pressures, the local housing strategy will play an increasingly significant role in supporting inclusive growth and tackling inequality across our communities. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very much. Elaine, do you want to say anything prior to questions? No? So, do councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Leishman with the quickest to draw.
Thanks very much, Convener. I've got a few, but I'll wait my turn for the rest of them. The first one really was to ask Elaine is, do we have brownfield sites already identified? And if so, how many and at what locations? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Leishman. Work is underway to identify suitable sites. The team's focus will be on areas within Highland Perthshire, followed by Kinross, Strathearn and Strathmore, then Perth. Evaluation of the sites will be completed through feasibility assessments, along with identifying suitable sites, engaging with owners and developers at a very early stage. And the team are looking to develop a register for the information on the sites to be held and easily accessed. So at this moment, we're just working through, we've not actually confirmed potential or suitable sites at this moment in time. Ben.
And if I could just add, this is something which we'd intend to be reporting back to this committee on as part of the overall monitoring and reporting back of the delivery of the strategy.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Bailey, huh?
Thank you very much. My questions with regards to do with technology and future-proofing properties being built. We already do that, or builders already do that in terms of physical adaptations, i.e. putting in mounting points and hidden rails, so that if they're required, it's easily to do because a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. But I don't think we do that with the technology. I was chatting to the team yesterday, where if builders already during the build put in likes of network points and things, making it easier to put in technology instead of relying wholly on wireless, then it might make things a lot easier. And I just wondered if we've had that conversation with builders with regards to putting in, even if they're hidden until required, sort of networking points and other technology adaptations.
That's a good question, and today we're just finalising our design guide. So basically it's a design guide that we'll give to builders and RSLs regarding the standard of accommodation when building it, and that is an area that we've actually developed within the design guide, because it's a really good point instead of building and then going back and retrofitting in terms of points and whatnot. So yes, to your question, it's something that we're including in our design guide, which we're hoping to have finalised by the end of the month, and then it's a guide that we'll give to developers in terms of the type of housing that we want them to build for us.
Thank you. Glad to see it's in progress.
Lynn Palmer, you're one of our tenant reps, and you've come to the meeting. I would actually like you to join the body of our meeting, since you're actually part of the meeting itself. I'll wait for you to do that. Anything you like. Could you check her microphone will work if she needs to speak? That should make a difference. So, Mrs. Palmer, if you feel you have any questions you wish to ask, just raise your hand and I'll allow you to ask any questions. But just in case that happens, so it gives you that opportunity.
We nearly always have excellent documents. Sometimes you think of something afterwards that might be missing, but then it is just the LHS, so to set up for 4 or 5 years. So you don't in the ensuing years, ideas can come to you which you can put to other members of staff or to be passed on, and that always happens with me. So I have a lot of creative thinking and I get a lot of ideas, and some of them are can be a bit off the wall, but that comes with being a creative thinker. So apart from that, just to say that it's excellent, really.
Well, thank you very much. I think your ideas are no different from what comes at us anyway. It comes at officers anyway from the elected members of the committee. If you have any ideas or things you think of outside of this committee, feel free to contact the officers you have contact with or myself to raise these issues. There is an action plan as part of the report, right. And obviously the group that are set up with that action plan, it's their role to take things forward. And what the local housing strategy sets out as targets, what we're aiming for. It doesn't mean that there's no flexibility in it, and the ability to do better than, or to do something different. So
maybe then I get a chance, seeing as you're giving me a wonderful opportunity, is that I heard on Radio 4 recently about modular housing happening between Cambridge University and an organisation called Hill, and that's down in England. But up here in Scotland, we had Josh Littlejohn was putting forward tiny houses. So these are all things that are happening in certain places, but they don't yet get into documents. So if everybody was to think about, or maybe go onto a Hill organisation or Cambridge University, and you can get to find out, what the modular housing is they're doing. I think it's only you can only be in them for a year, and that's the same as Josh Littlejohn's tiny houses. So
the local housing strategy does mention off-site manufacturing as a opportunity for, and I know through COSLA meetings that there is discussion with other councils about modular builds and using it. Highland Council are looking at that, and I think Dundee Council are as well, and it is an option for us too going forward. All options are open, but I'll let Elaine Ritchie comment on what she thinks about the modular option, or even Ben might want to comment as well.
Not a fan of modular housing, but that's why it's been progressed down in England, just because it's very temporary. It doesn't meet the standard of the quality of housing here in Scotland. But however, it's an area that we are discussing with the Scottish Government, and it is an option. It's just no local authority in Scotland's progressing it because it is a temporary measure and doesn't give the standard of housing that we expect to provide for our tenants. And I don't think it's an option particularly targeted for homeless people, and that's an area we think it should be permanent housing, not temporary. But it's an area that we are discussing with the Scottish Government.
Just to follow up, the residential design guide that Elaine mentioned, which we're in production and finalising, also sets out some statements regarding modular construction. So it's something which is a fast changing area, and we're very much monitoring it to ensure that it's done. If it's to be done, it's done appropriately.
Very much. I'll move back to councillor questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, convener. On page 79 of the pack, I don't know what the page number on the actual plan is, but it's the page that refers to Gypsy Traveller sites. A couple of fairly shocking or challenging statistics there about having the second highest weekly rent in Scotland and one of the lowest satisfaction levels amongst Gypsy Traveller tenants. So it is, the so what question, what are we doing to improve tenant satisfaction and to address the unaffordability issue regarding chalet rents?
Yeah, we do come out looking like we do have a high rent, but that's based on we have chalets. These are not, it's not like for like, you're not comparing apples with apples, and it's something that we're looking at as part of our transformation of both Double Dykes, and then we'll move on to Bobbin Mill. In terms of the satisfaction, yeah, that was done a couple of years ago, and we've had quite a lot of engagement, and if we do a survey now, and hopefully it will come out really high. We've engaged really well with our Gypsy Traveller residents, particularly Bobbin Mill and Double Dykes with the investment that we secured from the Scottish Government and also from our own investment from the HRA. So we have monthly meetings with the residents. We've also put in place a newsletter and different forms of channels to communicate with them. So we've not done a recent survey because we've been fully engaging, but that's something that we'll pick up as part of our return, is to do a further official survey regarding our communication and engagement.
Thanks. Yeah, just to come back on that, I think that there is a case for comparing apples with apples in terms of the size of chalets against the comparative rent for the equivalent number of apartment or bedroomed houses, and this may be something that we can pick up in the affordable housing member officer working group, because I think that there is far too much of a discrepancy between them at the moment, and I think affordability is a big issue. So
they make sure we're doing the right thing. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, convener. I may have a second question. I may come to that later on, but my main question to Elaine is on rural housing. And Elaine, I was in touch with you recently on this. We now have a housing needs and demand assessment for Tayside and for Perth and Kinross. We also have similar local assessments for, obviously of interest to me, for Comrie, but also Pitlochry, Aberfeldy, Dunkeld, Burnham and Mount Blair, which I think is Strathardle and Kirkmichael. So could I ask Elaine, with these local needs assessments, and I'm sure we're all aware of the constraint that applies with the availability of land, but with these local assessments, can I ask, one, is the intention to cover other areas, or will that depend on local demand? And secondly, how are we going to progress these local assessments going forward?
Thanks, Councillor Donaldson. So just to recap, we've commissioned Communities Housing Trust who've carried out 5 housing needs assessments within Mount Blair, Dunkeld and Burman, Aberfeldy, Cromley and Pitlochry. And as a result of those housing needs assessment, we've managed to secure some funding in order to get the Communities Housing Trust to develop a local strategy based on those housing needs assessments. And they will work with the communities in order to identify grant funding and community-led projects. It's in early days, isn't it, Ben, in terms of the strategy, because the assessments have just been completed, but there'll be individual strategies based on the housing needs assessments, and it'll be fed into the update through the local housing strategy.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Kugali.
Yeah, firstly, I'd just like to really point to those quite encouraging statistics in regards to the reduction of homelessness since 2016. They are really, really good to see. Quite honestly, it wasn't something I was expecting to see given COVID and the other things that have happened in that period, but it is good to see progress. In that, though, and I've not really noticed it within here, but I assume it is, it is data we've got. Do we have information on the root causes of homelessness before it gets to the point that we're kind of trying to intervening on the housing situation? So in regards to the social issues, etc. And how much are we doing in terms of trying to deal with them before it gets to a point where we're really having to look at, the final end solution?
Yeah, prevention is always key, Elaine.
In terms of the root causes of homelessness, the main cause is relationship breakdown. That's our main cause, and it's particularly single males that present as homeless make up the large percentage of our homeless presentations. And we work tirelessly to prevent homelessness where we can. We've got various measures in place, particularly through our Home First model in terms of early intervention. So that's going into schools. We've got various protocols with our Perth prison, with the hospitals and things like that. It's about intervening early, and we'll try our hardest to do that. But where we can't is when people present as homelessness, and that is sometimes because we've got a shortage of housing. We don't have enough time in order to resolve it quick enough. So to give you some reassurance, homeless prevention is key to what we do, and it's key to the foundation of our Home First model as well.
Yeah, at COSLA it was mentioned that the Scottish Government will bring forward a paper after the summer, in which actual prevention of homelessness is going to play a key role in that paper, and hopefully that means that the extra finances will come to help councils do exactly as you suggested. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, convener. My question is, as a new councillor, I'm not really sure what smart technology in the home involves. And also if it's possible to say what the cost premium of that is per home. Thank you.
Smart technology is the use of sensors, the use of Wi-Fi, using data in order to support people to live independently, and it's dependent on the person's needs. So we've got a suite of tools that we will use to allow them to sustain and maintain their tenancy. We've got a smart flat that I could be in contact with you if you want to go and visit it, and it will show and display all our smart technology, and that's something that's available for all members. If they wish to get in contact, I can arrange that. In terms of the cost, it's normally just the cost of the Wi-Fi. Most of the appliances we get through the provider that we've already got, but again, it depends on what we're installing in people's homes.
Thank you.
Bailey McLaren.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson touched on part of my question. It's just more a broader question, Elaine. And what challenges are you facing in the rural housing issue and trying to make ground to looking at meeting these targets that we've set?
The biggest challenge is land, and suitable land, as you know, that's the biggest challenge, and that's why we need to have really good engagement with landowners and developers. Land is the biggest, and suitable and accessible land is one of our key challenges, particularly in the rural areas.
Thank you, and I'm happy to assist in any way I can with connections of that to try and resolve some of these questions.
I think, sort of, as we are aware, the cost of living crisis as well, sort of has not helped, inflation. So an ongoing issue for us now is about the sustainability. It's about being able to make sure that what we build is affordable. And so the team are very, very focused on making sure that anything we look at may not be able to be done as quickly as we would like because of the costs at the moment. So that's not helped the situation as well. And can I be indulged slightly? I was typing a message into, thank you very much, into the chat for the committee, but if we can go back to the homelessness question as well, Councillor Kigali, I mean, sort of this committee in its various guises will have heard me sing the praises of our housing team, particularly in relation to homelessness. We are sector leading in that. But sort of as well as what Elaine described, the team also take a very proactive and successful approach to sustaining tenancies as well. So working with our tenants where we begin to be concerned, or they come to us to say we've got issues, and the team work really, really hard to make sure that people do not lose their tenancies and become homeless.
Thank you. Councillor Nicole.
Thank you. And Elaine, excuse me, in the main part of the report in 7.3 on page 17, you mentioned delivering quality homes, affordable, warm, zero emissions, etc. And that whole section, you talk about delivering houses for people with varying needs, and you highlight wheelchair accessible homes and adaptations. But as I've asked before, this committee, and so I'm seeking ongoing reassurance that when we're looking for people with varying needs, we're also looking at people with ambulant disabilities, with sensory impairments, neither of which are mentioned in the report that I can find. So I think I would just like some reassurance that all that diversity is considered when we're looking for to provide homes for people with a variety of different needs. Thank you.
Yeah, it's covered in our action plan under priority 2. So when we refer to independent living, suitable housing options and tenure types, we could probably be more explicit in that, but I think that's where we're referring to. So maybe that's something when we're giving an update as part of the action plan, we could maybe drill down a wee bit further.
Thanks, Elaine. I mean, I do obviously know that work is going on, but I think for the purposes of this committee and for the wider public who may be listening in, I think it's important that we are a bit more explicit that this work is ongoing, because there are a number of people out there who struggle to find appropriate homes for their particular needs. Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. First of all, thank Elaine for this comprehensive report. Very full and interesting, and also echoes Barbara's thoughts about Home First, which I think we should be very proud of. And as convener, I was always ready to congratulate them for their work there. My question relates to, I've lost my page now because I've knocked it, the section about local heat and energy efficiency strategy. Going back to rural areas, we're talking here, it says due to large proportion of low density or rural households, heat pumps are expected to be significant household decarbonisation. My point is in rural areas, electricity is the main source, which relies on infrastructure overhead cables, which are prone to damage in storms. Storm Arwen was a prime example where in my area people were cut off for 7 days. So I'm wondering whether heat pumps really are the solution, since they depend upon electricity, and that the infrastructure is vulnerable to storm damage. Is there no other source we should be looking at?
Still under review in terms of what's going to replace our gas central heating boilers. Hydrogen's been discussed, it's still not been progressed. Nicola and our team are dipping into all the pilot studies that are available to see which energy, where we're going to go. We're looking at solar PV installations, solar thermal installations as well. So we're trying a whole range of different things in terms of finding the right thing. So heat pumps is one thing that we have installed, and we've installed 210 within our properties, and it's not for all properties. So again, it's what's available on the market. It's also materials, and also having skilled tradespeople to install and also repair. So we're still at a very early stage, like all local authorities, in terms of what is the best method going forward.
Thank you, Gabriela. I think that's quite agreeable. We can't use a one-size-fits-all solution. Something I read about, and I've never heard of before, and I've only just read about it on Monday, called hydro-treated vegetable oil, which is now about to be produced on a commercial basis with 90% less carbon emissions. It will take the place of fuel oil, I understand, and kerosene. I don't know much more about it than that. I've only read it on Monday, but I understand you can even fly an aeroplane on it. So, and it has been done. Virgin Atlantic, I think, have flown an aeroplane on it. So there you are. That's a source of the future.
Thank you. Councillor Welsh.
Thank you, convener. I think my sort of question is quite timely with regard to the last sort of question and comments. So a fantastic report. It's great to see, innovation and vision for the next 5 years for housing within Perth and Kinross. I guess my question is associated with climate, related to cost of living. There's going to be significant retrofit needed to meet the EISH standards as they gradually tighten over the next few years. Is there some response that you're able to give in terms of reassurance that potentially the funds to do that may be forthcoming from the council or indeed from other sources? And very quickly, just to comment on Councillor Braun, gas central heating goes off when there's a power cut as well, because your pump to pump the water around the heating or oil-fired central heating goes off at the same time. So this is not just a problem for heat pumps. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of retrofitting, that's something we've started in terms of our APCs, focusing on making sure we reach the target of having all our properties up to the required standard by 2025. And the monies we're using for that is through our capital improvement programmes, monies through the HRA. There is no funding yet available, and there's small pockets of funding through heat apps and whatnot, but nothing coming through from Scottish Government. And it's something that we're progressing it through discussions through ALACTRO regarding it will be a significant investment for all social housing to meet the targets by 2032, when all properties need to be in APC Band B. Some properties will require significant investment, and the HRA can't purely fund that. So it will be, but it's a planned approach that we're currently taking just now, working closely with our colleagues in finance to have a robust plan. It's just data gathering the information and meeting the first target, which is our Band D just now, which is affordable within our HRA. budget, but going for the band B for some of our properties that are pre-1914, some of them will require substantial work, or there'll need to be an alternative plan regarding disinvesting and possibly demolition. So yes, it's a work in progress at this moment in time.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you.
Elaine, could you remind the committee who Electo are?
Sorry, apologies. It's chief housing officers that meet on a regular basis from all 32 local authorities, and it's all heads of housing that come together, and it's a really good forum to raise issues, find out that we're not the only one with issues, and it's a discussion forum, and it goes through COSLA as well, and they take any issues or concerns through that route.
Thank you very much. I have 4 people wishing second question, so Councillor Leishman.
Convener, can I be a rascal and ask 2? Okay. Done. Yeah, my first one then is, what are the existing levels of engagement with private landlords in Perth and Kinross? Thank you.
We've got really good engagements with our private landlords. We utilise the database on our private landlord registration database in terms of our reach out to all registered landlords. We're in regular contact with them via email contact, particularly through anything, if there's changes to legislation, even our reach out in terms of supporting us with people displaced from Ukraine. We also have a 6-monthly newsletter. We did have a private sector landlord engagement forum, but the feedback that we got from landlords that they prefer email communication engagement, and that's how we've continued to engage with them. So there's lots of engagement going on, and because we've got a private sector leasing team with a private sector leasing arrangements, landlords come to us quite a lot for advice and support. So I think we've got a good reach with our private sector within Perth and Kinross.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. And my question again was on the financial risks associated with meeting the housing supply targets. Scottish Federation of Housing Associations have pointed to a £7 million a year shortfall in Scottish Government funding to achieve the 2040 targets. And the page 66 of the report refers to delivering 32% of all housing in Perth and Kinross as being affordable, whilst we have a 25% affordable housing policy. So is there capacity in the HRA to bridge that 7% gap? Is that via buybacks and off-the-shelf purchases, or are there other mechanisms that bridge that gap? And is our 210 home target a year, subject to getting the current level of funding from the Scottish Government, or the funding at the increased level that the SFHA were talking about?
So in terms of the HRA with the 7%, Stephen Coyle reassures me we can bridge that with the HRA. In terms of our 210 target, yeah, that is based on that we need the funding from the Scottish Government to achieve that target. I don't know, Ben, if you want to add.
Yes, please. So this strategy. Thank you. It's a soft button. Sorry, this strategy will in due course be accompanied by our next local development plan, Local Development Plan 3, where we set out the key planning policy, and within that what the affordable housing planning policy is, and potentially the percentage. That is an opportunity to look again and review that. It's not easily done, but there is scope there to look at what the overall balance of market housing and affordable housing coming forward in the period is. It doesn't address the funding question, but it helps provide context in terms of what we're willing to look at in terms of delivery, and the 210 target being challenging but deliverable.
Councillor Cogali, for your sake.
Yeah, my question is in regards to the affordable housing, the development contributions.
or the developer contributions. There's a case that I've kind of been engaged with where somebody's reconsidering whether they're going to engage with the redevelopment of what is currently a non-residential property at all because they don't feel that it's affordable now. Is that something that has come up before, or is this kind of a rogue case, or are we accidentally, whilst trying to do the right thing, potentially limiting redevelopment of properties by pushing up the cost too much?
I'll take this. So it sounds like that's an instance of viability where a planning policy requirement such as affordable housing, or there's other sometimes requirements, would impact upon the viability of a scheme as a whole, which can often arise where it's reusing an older or historic building. Our planning policy, and indeed national planning policy, sets out the way that the viability tests can justify a relaxation or removal of the planning policy requirement. So in principle, there shouldn't be an instance where planning policy renders a scheme unviable, provided there's adequate evidence of the viability test submitted to the planning authority. I hope that answers the question.
Councillor McLaren, I think you were next for the. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Convener. My question is really a clarification, really. On page 85, it states, the charter data states that only 5% of the 5,258 Perth and Kinross homes have an EPC certificate rating of B. And I was just wondering, of those sort of 263 homes, how many of those are new builds and how many are existing properties that have been upgraded? Thank you.
I can't probably give you that information straight away in terms of how many are new builds, but out of that 5%, it's what we've got is 484. I don't know in terms of out that 404 what proportion are new builds, but the bulk probably will be new builds and any work that we've done, but I could get that information after today and send it on to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Convener. So I wanted to follow up on the previous question I asked, and I don't think I made it clear, but talking about storm damage, I was just want to bring the point up about most rural homes have wood-burning stoves as their backup heat source, and I understand we're trying to stop people having those, and I just wonder, is that the right way forward, given that serious storm damage can leave people without heat in rural areas for a considerable time?
Our stopping is that we're not allowing people to install new wood burning stoves. We've had requests just because of the cost of living and the increase. It's based on the legislation that we need to follow from the Scottish Government. It would mean that our homes wouldn't meet the standard, and that's why we've said no more permissions to install wood burning stoves within properties. But we understand there's the odd cases, particularly in our rural areas where it's off the grid and whatnot, and we need to work with those individuals regarding, and it is a blanket policy, but there can be exceptions to it depending on the circumstances of that individual. We've had quite a lot of requests, particularly within the city area, to install wood burning stoves, but there's no issues there in terms of people being on the grid and whatnot. So in terms of the rural areas, we need to look on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks for that. At least we're prepared to look. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's related to air quality issues and people burning wood rather than smokeless fuels within urban areas, rather than like us in rural Perthshire, where you're not going to affect air quality by what you burn when nobody lives within 5 miles of you. So yeah. Councillor Leishman, you started and we will finish with you.
Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, my final question is what training or courses are available to the housing staff, social housing landlords, private landlords and letting agents, and do we have figures on the uptake of whatever training is available? Thank you.
I take it that's regarding child and adult protection. Yeah, sorry, I missed the just start with that. Yeah, so in terms of child and adult protection, all staff within housing and including our RSLs and also private sector landlords are offered and take up the child protection training. There's 3 essential modules which are delivered by our child protection training team through e-learning modules regarding child protection, adult protection and GIRFIT, which are all available free and provided to all housing staff, including private landlords. I don't have figures on the uptake for external use, but I've emailed my colleague in organisation development to see if I can get that information, and I'll send it on after committee. However, the last time I did request that information, the uptake was extremely high, and we request that information as part of our audit in terms of who's carried out and completed the training. And also alongside that, we also sit, particularly some of my senior managers sit on the Child Protection Committee and Adult Protection Committee and the various work streams involved in that. And we also have a policy regarding child and vulnerable person policy for both child and adult protection, and training is mandatory for staff within housing, from our housing officers to our trade operatives. So yeah, from practice in terms of audits and external inspections, feedback received have been really positive regarding housing's contribution and role to child and adult protection, and in some cases highlighted areas of really good practice in terms of the role that housing staff have in identifying and coordinating a response to vulnerable people, and in some cases have prevented circumstances deteriorating or children being left at risk.
Thanks very much, Elaine. That's really comprehensive. I appreciate that a lot. Thanks.
And finally, Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, I just didn't want Councillor Leishman getting the last word. So. But serious question was with regard to page 75 of the pack and wheelchair accessible houses, which referred to 21 applicants on the waiting list for a wheelchair accessible house. But in the HNDA housing needs and demand assessment, there being 639 households. Now, obviously, not all of those are going to have their unmet need met from the Common Housing Register and waiting list. But are we confident that the 10% wheelchair accessible figure within the proportion of houses, new builds that we create each year, is that sufficient to meet those 639 households' needs in the short term? Or do we need to look at it again?
That 10%'s come from all the work that we've done through our independent living panel. So we set up an independent living panel about 2 or 3 years ago, and that was looking at information held by social work and education regarding people with particular support requirements. And we've used a lot of that information to gain intelligence in terms of current and also future need. So we're fairly confident that 10% will meet that need based on the information that we currently hold. However, it's something that we're currently will keep under review, and we'll consider it as part of our buyback approach as well, in terms of buying accessible properties back when we're buying them off the open market, and also the work that we're doing with our health and social care partners in terms of our project work to support people with particular support requirements as well. So it's an ongoing thing. It's a target that we've got in place, and it's a target that we hope to maybe exceed, but based on the information that we hold, we think that will meet the current need and also the future need regarding that type of housing.
Just to follow up on that, do we have discussions with the health service? Because obviously, people with chronic diabetes sometimes end up with amputations due to vascular issues in their lower legs, etc. And with the advanced treatments of diabetes going forward, it may be that there's more people need this type of treatment going forward. So do we engage with the NHS to keep an eye on that type of change in their type of demographics?
Yeah, we've got lots of engagement with NHS. So we've got an in-house OT, so they do a lot of engagement with NHS regarding that. But through the Health and Social Care Partnership, in terms of their assessment, there's a key trigger within their assessment documentation which links directly with our housing system. So when people have got any conditions which there is a current need or a future need, it engages us to go out and do housing options to look at, is it a current housing need or a potential future housing need? So it's considered through the housing options approach and the assessment approach from housing, but also health and social care, and NHS are part of that.
Thank you very much. That's us at the end of questions, so I will now move the report. This report seeks approval of the new 5-year local housing strategy for 22 to 27 for Perth and Kinross to meet the requirements of housing legislation and the Scottish Government guidance. The Housing Scotland Act 2001 places a statutory requirement on local authorities to prepare a local housing strategy supported by an assessment of housing need and demand. The local housing strategy outlines what the council and its partners would like to deliver in all areas of Perth and Kinross during this 5-year period. The local housing strategy is firmly aligned to the priorities and visions of the corporate plan for 23 to 28, and where everyone can live well, free from poverty and inequality. It also reflects the views of our communities, elected members, stakeholders and partner organisations. These views have helped influence and development of the local housing strategy priorities and outcomes which most important for Perth and Kinross. They will enable Perth and Kinross Council and partners to deliver high quality housing and housing services to meet the needs of local people in all our tenures. The local housing vision places housing at the centre of major ambitions for Perth and Kinross. To achieve this vision and realise the wider aims set out in the corporate plan and the local outcome improvement plan, the local housing strategy has 4 key priorities: providing more affordable homes to support livable and sustainable communities, providing a range of housing options that people may easily access, afford and keep, delivering housing for people with varying needs, and delivering quality homes with affordable warmth, zero emissions and smart technology. To meet these 4 key priorities, there's 35 actions that are detailed in the Local Housing Strategy Action Plan, which is Appendix 3 of our papers, and will be implemented through the Local Housing Delivery Group and by operational teams. I look forward to receiving an update on the progress of the Local Housing Strategy Action Plan in 12 months' time, outlining the key achievements. Therefore, I move this report and ask committee to approve the recommendations outlined in section 2.1 of the papers. Councillor McColgan, to second, please.
Yes, I'm happy to formally second. Thank you, Convener.
I am now open for comments on the report. Councillor Leishman.
Thanks very much, Convener. Firstly, I'd like to add my thanks to yours earlier on in the meeting, to Andrew White and Caroline Docherty for all their hard work, and congratulations on their achievements. In my first year as a councillor, I've not only been massively impressed by, but also hugely grateful to staff across the many different arms of our housing department. I'll try and be relatively brief as well. The 2016 to 21 outcomes and achievements show successes, and these are a credit to our housing department and also to the previous committee. I'd also like to record my thanks to them. There is a wealth of knowledge and experience on this committee, such as yourself, Convener, Councillor Barrett and Councillor Braun, and as a first-time councillor, it's absolutely fantastic to learn on the job from you guys, so thank you. As a council, we are in a familiar position that many local authorities face, though, in the fact that we desperately need housing. Increasing the amount of affordable housing we have is pressing. As the report says, it is vital for promoting independence and social inclusion. And affordability for shelter isn't asking the world. Housing is central to all the other rights people enjoy: education, employment, relationships, having a family, and so on. All of these things rely, to some extent, one or another, on affordable shelter. We do have a housing crisis, and it's not limited to the disadvantaged in our communities. There's no doubt that for many people, housing issues often relate to other aspects of their lives. We have a deficit of 2,800 jobs. We've heard the statistics regarding low-paid employment and the growing gender pay gap in Perth and Kinross, and these are all very bleak and grim facts. This is exacerbated by people seeing their wages stagnate, and the report also says that property prices have increased by 26% over the last decade. That inevitably means that affordability has become unrealistic for so many people. And we know that private renting is now incredibly out of reach for many low-income households. And while I disagree with profiteering from someone else's fundamental basic human need, I'm pleased to hear that we have built and maintained good relationships with private landlords. I've also said before that with a housing shortage and employability issues, we face an exodus of people from Perth and Kinross, and that future problem is coming at us fast, as we have got twice as many people travelling from our region to go to work than come into Perth and Kinross to go to work. There is nothing more powerful than an idea that comes of age, and we desperately need to embark on an ambitious house building programme. I understand that that is a wider Scotland and UK issue, and as we as a local authority are somewhat limited in what we can do, but things like the acquisition of brownfield sites and focusing on more rural communities like Highland Perthshire, Strathearn and Strathmore is very much welcomed. And to finish on, I'd like to thank Elaine Ritchie and her wider team for an excellent comprehensive report and a strategy that will help to tackle inequality in our communities. Because to conquer inequalities, then joined up action needs to happen across other areas, but the work our housing team do is a great contribution in trying to win that battle. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. And just sort of picking up on Councillor Leishman's last comments, I think that the report is comprehensive. It is detailed. It evidences the commitment and professionalism of the service and the compassion and passion of officers for delivering more affordable homes and tackling poverty and supporting our most vulnerable residents. On a negative note, it does say in the report that the local housing strategy should be clear, concise and easy to read. I don't think it's any of those things, to be honest, and I do think we need to look carefully at that. It's a compelling read, but it's certainly not an easy read, and it's certainly not concise. I think it is repetitive, and that may be a function of officers not wanting to omit anything, but I think we need to think about how this is presented and appreciate that its main readership might be the Scottish Government, but I think that there needs to be a version that is available to or accessible to a wider audience. Thank you.
Yes, you can comment.
Councillor Barrett, I share your point. So we've developed an easy read guide and it's available on the website, and I can circulate it after committee if you want.
And I think I've already said to the director is that the video that we've seen as well, I've asked for that to go onto our YouTube channel so that it can be shared through social media more easily. And of course that can then be linked to the short plan at the same time as well. So that information gets out there, and as you say, it can be read by our tenants and by the Scottish Government, and both have that in-depth understanding of what we're doing. So thank you, Peter, thank you for that. I have no other requests for comments. So are we agreed with the paper? I'm going to take a 5-minute recess at the moment as a comfort break. I have requests of that on my chat. So 5 minutes. So we will come back at 11:51ish.
Good.
Would include the number of people who've benefited, the number of volunteers who've attended, and a kind of general sense of the benefit that they feel it's brought. That's relatively light touch, but it's based on the capacity of the team and also the relatively small amounts of money that have been distributed.
Should we have a time estimate, potentially?
Yeah, we're hoping to issue those monitoring requests this month, and typically it's between 4 to 6 weeks to get that information together. So ideally we would be able to put it into the next round of committee cycles.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, convener. I've asked about this before, but it's about the Cash First partnership. There's been a deferral, but could I ask Lee what the likely timeline is now on this? And secondly, with the programme, are we applying for this for the whole of Perth and Kinross or for certain specific localities, areas? And I'm also trying to think of this in terms of our transformation programme, just how it links in there, because it is, from all I can perceive, it's effectively, it's about joined up local government and bringing areas together.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I might actually ask Claire, who I know is in the room, to take this question, as I know there's been some movement with the Citizens Advice Bureau on this particular point. Is that okay, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll probably get more detailed information back to you, but the Anti-Poverty Task Force recently signed off a paper on cash first approaches. Additional funding and resources have been agreed, so we have got a coordinating post, I think a coordinator. Citizens Advice Bureau are taking the lead for the cash first approach, and the approach very much will be embedded at a locality basis and at a locality level. So there's a short briefing that was approved by the task force, and we can kind of circulate more detailed information at some point over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Claire. Can I just then ask, this is a bidding process, however, yeah, so we have to, do we know, are we up against quite a number of other local authorities?
Yes, we will be, but I don't have the detail of that. Lee's agreeing with me. We don't have the detail as yet, but yes, we will be.
Nonetheless, at least progress is being made. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for the report. My question is in relation to section 4.4 on page 182 of our pack, and you refer to community food banks. Can you maybe clarify what it is you mean by that, please?
I might ask David to double check. Sorry, I'm breaking the mic now. You okay to that one, David? Thanks.
I'm on. So within the paper, community food banks will
essentially mean anything from a per food bank to a community larder model.
Thank you. I feared that's what you meant. And I did raise this at a previous committee meeting, maybe not in this particular report. I think it's really important that we distinguish between community larders, which are primarily food reduction or food waste reduction programs and are open to anybody for any need at all, as opposed to food banks that are run by the Trussell Trust, because I think the language that we use is quite important. I do accept that it's fair to say that with the recent cost of living crisis, the access to community larders and community food shares has increased because of need rather than as well as the need to reduce food waste. But I think it's important that distinction is made, because they serve two very entirely different purposes. And I think I wouldn't like people to be discouraged from accessing community larders, for its primary purpose of reducing food waste. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, we've seen that the community larders, which were originally set up to reduce food waste, now are really saying actually the majority of people coming in are coming in because of food poverty. We do encourage them to, not just hand out emergency food packs, but to ensure that they are checking out, are people getting support from Welfare Rice and CAB. If they're getting repeat customers, if you like to use that phrase, that there's more work around that, and it's not building up a dependency. But we can be clearer in the papers around it. So.
Okay, I have no further questions lined up for you. So David and Lee, thank you very much for your input there. I will now move to the report. This report covers key areas of work led or supported by the community planning partnerships. Of particular note is the ongoing commitment for partners to respond to the cost of living crisis, which the Council has made a further commitments to in its recent budget. We are asked to note the progress across these areas of work, and I am happy to move the report we do so.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm more than happy to second this report, and I am very well aware through other local community work that I'm involved in just how valuable this work is. So thank you.
I'm now open for comments. Start with Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. And it was just to say a wee bit more about the Cash First initiative in Perth and Kinross, which will be delivered, or where the Citizens Advice Bureau will provide a coordinator to work in localities to help deliver that. And it's very, very closely aligned to what we agreed in our budget in terms of local coordination and project management support for the locality working across all of Perth and Kinross, and we think it should dovetail really well with that. The Citizens Advice Bureau were successful in gaining grant funding from the Trussell Trust to deliver this initiative. So that's really welcome, particularly as there is the pause in the national funding. But obviously, what we agreed in our budget will help bridge and overcome that as well. I think with regard to the comments that or the discussion that we had with regard to food banks, there is more. Or there are more food banks in operation in Perth and Kinross than simply the one in Perth. We've got Not Broken community food bank in Kinross. I think there's also a food bank in Blairgowrie, and I think in Aberfeldy as well. And I fully take on board the distinction that Councillor McCall was making between the food shares and other community food initiatives, which don't require reference or referral processes, but reduce food waste, but also provide much needed and critical food support to people in hardship. So, but I think that the Cash First initiative will work really well with what we're intending to do to tackle poverty, and particularly with the parents of children in poverty in Perth and Kinross.
Thank you very much. Can we note the report? So we move on to our final item on the agenda. Item 9 is a presentation update on the cost of living and child poverty, and Claire Miller is going to deliver a presentation for us on this, and then we can have some questions afterwards if members have any questions.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I've got a short presentation and I'm conscious of time, so we'll sort of try and keep it relatively brief, providing an overview on progress and actions undertaken by the Anti-Poverty Task Force, a brief update on the cost of living, and an update on child poverty. Next slide, please. So, as you will all recall, the Anti-Poverty Task Force was approved at Council in September last year. The first meeting of the task force, so it was properly established in October, so very soon after committee, with an agreed remit as detailed on the slide. So very much to champion the reduction in poverty levels and the associated stigma across Perth and Kinross, to use its influence across the public, private sectors and in our communities to drive necessary and urgent action, to provide that coordinating focal point for all current activities aimed at reducing inequalities and child poverty, including food, fuel, rural poverty and tackling employability issues, etc. To shape the further development of actions and activities through collaborative partnership working, guidance and feedback, and to oversee delivery of mitigating actions and indeed their impact through regular monitoring and scrutiny by the task force. Next slide, please. So progress so far, you'll recall that the Anti-Poverty Task Force was launched at the Big Lunch event organised by the Perth City Leadership Forum. On the back of the Big Lunch, that facilitated many direct connections to a range of different organisations offering support and assistance. So really good focus and engagement from our business sectors. Indeed, liaison with the national farming unions in the area has really led to discussions nationally on farmers, not just at a local level but a national level, supplying fresh produce which will be turned into meals. And there is an event planned locally here and indeed nationally in May of this year. A couple of bigger initiatives are at the very early planning stages, such as an energy scheme, as well as some skills development. So very much working with the business sector in terms of employment. The coordinated approach that we've just described, and Councillor Barrett gave a more detailed update on there in terms of cash first, citizens' advice, securing the funding that was described from the Trussell Trust for that real local approach to cash first approaches, and having that coordinator will make a huge difference in linking into our locality working. And key has been really building on those relationships across all sectors, so across the third sector, the public sector and indeed the business sector, and some really good engagement with citizens' advice, welfare rights and third sector colleagues in terms of coming together and operating in a much more collaborative way to sort of tackle poverty and take the mitigating actions. The next slide gives a wee bit more detail on some other areas, and I can't go into all of the level of detail, but we will prepare a more detailed briefing over the next couple of weeks. Many of you will recall Professor McKendrick from Caledonia University. He has supported us with much of our child poverty work. He attended one of our early meetings at the task force and provided quite a detailed overview of the national picture and indeed some of the challenges that we specifically have here locally. And that really supported the members of the task force to really identify some of their key themes. Very much taking that coordinated multi-agency approach over the winter period in particular in response to the cost of living, and really supported in some of our winter planning arrangements. So one of the key asks by the task force was to have our first responders, Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue, able to distribute cash first, food packs and warm home packs, and they have been instrumental in supporting that activity over the winter period and in particular over the festive close down. A facilitation of the expansion of the Perth gift card. The group have been very, very keen to do that, particularly within local supermarkets, and again promoting that cash first approach across our areas. We had really good take up in Letham, and that is an area that we're continuing to build on in terms of the use of the Perth gift card. We loaded up a number of cards pre-Christmas to ensure that people could have that kind of easy access to food within local supermarkets. We're looking at transport and the use of community transport in particular, working closely with community groups in Letham for a minibus trial, and indeed there has been some cross work across Kinross community groups and the community groups in Letham in terms of training volunteer driving. We're doing quite a bit of work supporting across the partnership, mapping of the poverty landscape across Perth and Kinross, which I think has been really helpful in terms of mapping the need, mapping the existing provision, identifying areas of duplication, but importantly identifying where there are gaps so that we know where to target our work. And Paul is on the call today, and he's been doing quite a bit of work on that over the last couple of weeks. We are also developing a communications plan so that we can really, I think, tie up our communications internally in terms of with partners, but also our sort of external communications with the general public in terms of the work of the task force, but more importantly, the support that is available at a kind of a wider PKC level, but also importantly at a local level. Next slide, please. So key themes through some of the work that the task force have undertaken so far. Everybody gave feedback and we've started to do a bit of a deep dive into some of these areas. You can see on the slide the key themes of focus for the task force over the next few months: employability, childcare, health and wellbeing, transport, cash first, living wage, the gender pay gap, and a real focus on some of the rural issues. And we heard some of those discussions in the local housing strategy item earlier on this morning. So that real focus on some of the challenges that are really facing people in rural areas has been a real focus, and there's been a real sort of appetite across the task force to look at those areas. An action plan has been developed to record and monitor all of the progress. There's lots of other actions that I'll not be able to cover in the session today. We've established a repository of good practice from other areas that we can learn from and adapt, and really bringing in some areas of good practice to inform sort of future improvements. We have partnership leads agreed and identified for each of the key themes that you can see there, and the approach that we take is to take each session and meeting and to do a deep dive. So really focusing on what do we know at the moment about this particular area, what's already happening or being progressed, where are the gaps, what else needs to be done, and where specifically can the task force add value. Whether that be around about resources, partnership, expertise, removing barriers. And I think what's fairly evident is that I think through a lot of the information and some of the discussions and decisions and proposals, budget proposals that were made at Council a couple of weeks ago, I think you can see sort of good engagement and a real focus on some of these areas, which has been really positive. Next steps for the task force are on the next slide. Very much continuing to use that influence across all of the sectors and drive the action to address the challenges that I highlighted. We've got a real ongoing focus at the moment in terms of employability. We had a good session a few weeks ago at the task force, and a number of actions were agreed, but we know that we need to do a deeper dive, so we've got another session on that planned. Experts will continue to be invited in on each of the themes that we've identified to do that deeper dive, and we will continue the work that I've just described in terms of the library of best practice, the mapping of the poverty landscape, which we will share with you hopefully over the next few weeks, and indeed we will progress many of the budget proposals that were made recently, which I will touch on later on. But certainly, you know, that real positive elected member support, and I think we've got support from many of you here. Parental employability, child poverty were just a couple of the areas that certainly came through in terms of some of the budget proposals. I've got a couple of slides now that give a very high level overview of where we're at with the cost of living, but we are in the process of preparing a more detailed briefing, mainly due to the fact that we don't have the most up-to-date data, and I know many of you do ask me when are we getting more up-to-date information. The last set of reliable data was produced pre-COVID. Subsequent statistics that we have been largely regarded as being unreliable because data collection methods were disrupted by COVID. And I know that I have said this before. So the figures that we have very much have been extrapolated from all Scotland figures and are at the moment the best estimates that we can produce at present to indicate who and how many people might be at risk or are at risk from the cost of living. What I would say to you is the Poverty and Inequality Commission, more detailed information is due to be released during next week, and we hope to get a more detailed report and more detailed information in terms of data. So we will get that out to you next week. Broadly, though, the information that we have continues to paint quite a difficult picture in terms of the cost of living. 7% of households who were already struggling financially are now under severe pressure, and we are experiencing and seeing that. A further 33%, so that's a third of the population, are experiencing financial challenges that have never experienced such challenges previously. Households, and you'll see there on the slide a detail of those households and groups identified as at risk. This very much mirrors our own experiences here. So households with one income earner, especially where they're working part-time, continue to be of particular concern. And again, the Poverty and Inequality Commission did raise concerns about families who narrowly miss out on qualifying for benefits. And again, that is the experience from our staff on the ground. People that are just missing out on benefits clearly are struggling. But you can see there on the slide, those are the groups that we really are focusing our targeted, our wraparound support on as we sort of, continue to work sort of out in our localities on a day-to-day basis. The next slide, and if it's not clear, we will share this within the briefing. And as I said, we, in the absence of reliable data, we continue to use a range of other sources. You can see from the graphs on the slide that there is that COVID bounce in applications for the Scottish Welfare Fund, even after the effects of COVID declined. That kind of second bounce can be seen in terms of the cost of living crisis. The rate of applications for crisis grants from the Scottish Welfare Fund remains substantially higher than pre-COVID times. And this trend is mirrored through usage of figures for the Perth Food Bank. And we do have food bank figures kind of more widely. But despite the fact that we now have many more community food offers, so not just food bank, food larders, a range of different kind of offers in place, we can still see that demand remains high when compared to pre-COVID times. Throughout the course of last year, the Council committed a wide range of poverty and cost of living funding. It's all been very well received, and we've received very, very positive feedback, very well received and utilised to support households across Perth and Kinross and communities who have been struggling with the cost of living. So that funding continues to be well directed, well utilised, well received with very positive feedback. So, as I said, next week the Scottish Government will release its Poverty and Inequality in Scotland report. This data next week will give us our first glimpse of the sort of the real, true post-COVID poverty and inequality levels. We have committed to preparing a report. We've got a draft of it ready. We're just waiting to plug in the figures as soon as they become available. We will share that with you. If it isn't towards the end of next week, hopefully it'll be the week after, and happy to take any questions or discuss if you would find that useful. Moving on now to this slide in terms of child poverty. This slide gives a quick reminder about the national context and the child poverty targets which the Scottish Government set way back in 2017. At the time, they seemed achievable, but with the unforeseen event of the COVID pandemic and indeed the current cost of living crisis, they do present, as we all know, a significant challenge to all of us. The next slide gives a wee bit of an overview. The Scottish Government, as you will recall, published their second child poverty delivery plan last year. Its three main objectives are to enable parents to go to work, to sustain employment or to progress in work, to ensure that children and families have what they need to make their basic needs and lead a dignified life, and to break that cycle of poverty for the next generation. Very much our child poverty delivery plan is very much aligned with and plugged into the Best Start, Bright Futures strategy. And to deliver this, we are working with teams, and we talk a lot about that kind of locality approach. We're working with teams, services and communities at a very local level to really connect parents and families into the range of support from housing, childcare, transport, employability, benefits and indeed more. So that real sort of local targeted approach is the one that we're taking. The next slide gives a wee bit of an overview. The Scottish Government put in place a package of support behind Best Start, Bright Futures, and they estimated that it will support 12,000, this package of support will support 12,000 parents to access and sustain employment and lift 50,000 children out of poverty. In Perth and Kinross, this roughly translates, and these figures do sort of change, but to getting about 340 parents into work and into sustainable jobs and lifting over 1,100 children out of poverty. Now, when you look at the figures in terms of child poverty, and we've talked about this before at a very kind of Perth and Kinross level, that feels like a real challenge. But if we break that down, and if you look at the next slide, so to really start to break that down at a real locality level into these bite-sized chunks, it is absolutely clear that this is well within our grasp. And I think, some of the funding and some of the additional sort of budget that came through council will really support us to get, I think, greater reach and impact and pace with the work that we're doing here, certainly round and about supporting parental employability and indeed the work round and about locality working. The figures on the slides are crude, they're for illustrative purposes only, but they do paint that clearer picture that if we take that locality-based, more targeted approach to the work that we do, and if we all work together, we will have a far greater chance of success and of making that difference to really lifting children out of poverty now and preventing them being parents of children in poverty in the future. So that real long-term strategic approach to the work round and about all of these areas such as transport, affordable housing that we've talked about, childcare and importantly employability. Just got a couple more slides, I think. The next one just gives just a reminder of the real positive commitment that we've got here in Perth and Kinross to tackling poverty and indeed child poverty. It's front and centre, key corporate priority as we signed off our corporate plan late last year, an overarching priority for the Community Planning Partnership, and we have got that very solid and very real commitment to working together to mitigate poverty here in Perth and Kinross. When we're out and about nationally, Scottish Government Improvement Service, we get lots of positive feedback in terms of the approach that we're taking. So what we now need to do is really make sure that our efforts and resources continue to be focused on those actions that will have the biggest reach and impact and take us much closer to meeting those very challenging targets that were set way back in 2017. The next slide just gives again a wee kind of recap and reminder in terms of our investigation of the root causes and consequences of poverty for children and families. We took that deep dive into the data. We identified those indicators that would really help us to measure the scope and the extent of poverty and the root causes, and really working now in terms of that scorecard, in terms of where we're making the difference and where we need to target our work. We've reviewed the research undertaken by other. As you know, we commissioned our own research to capture that lived experience and are continuing through our locality work to really focus those families that are identified as being at greater risk of poverty, lone parents, larger families, families with a disabled member, a child under one, young mother and minority ethnic families. And these were the families, priority families identified by the Scottish Government, and very much those are the ones that we are experiencing locally here in Perth and Kinross that are in the greatest level of need. So the next slide gives a bit more of detail in terms of the actual our own child poverty delivery plan. All of the information gathered informed, and the consultation informed the development of the plan. And in relation to each of the areas, you can see there are key objectives and some of the areas that we really are focusing on. So for example, in relation to work, our particular challenges are ensuring that work pays. 16.5% of those in work do earn less than the living wage. We did top last year the gender employment gap rate in Scotland. We do have those significant pay gaps with the rest of Scotland between men and women and between able-bodied and people with disabilities. And those issues such as access to affordable housing, childcare and transport are those barriers to employment. So that kind of real parental employability support will be very much welcomed by the teams. So very much we're responding by directing our services to looking at what they can do in these very specific areas. The rural poverty premium, just about everything's more expensive for people living in rural areas. Families are paying more for housing, for food, for transport and childcare. We do have the largest Gypsy traveller community in Scotland, and we are taking action, and I think, you know, interesting the discussion through the local housing strategy to ensure that they have the same access to our services as the majority of the population. We also know that stigma prevents families from seeking help and support. And again, this is something that we're working very closely with our frontline services and community groups to address, to improve our communications, to ensure greater levels of information about the services available, enable that greater access to the supports available within our localities. And again, lifting children out of poverty and breaking that intergenerational cycle of poverty is key, and taking that collective ownership to close the poverty-related attainment gap does remain a key focus. Our executive leadership team heard a presentation from Sharon Johnston yesterday, and we've got some really good examples of eking for some improvements, and some really good examples in terms of the use of PEF funding, of targeted work by Education and Children's Services colleagues in our most deprived areas. And we've got really good examples, particularly in Highland Perthshire, of a real multi-agency approach with education colleagues. So to make sure that we can connect help to those that need it, we need to know who and where they are. We have been working with teams to ensure that when people come forward for help, we offer no wrong door approaches. This very much means empowering our staff, tooling them up for the jobs so that they're confident about how and where referrals are made across and between services and organisations. And the work through the Anti-Poverty Task Force with the third sector, I think, has really helped that. So really working across teams to strengthen those connections, to ensure that families have got that web of support at a real local level, which gives them the help that they need. Okay, I just will quickly try and finish off the next couple of slides. Locality working, multidisciplinary working at a locality level is working really well, emerging in different places and indeed is at different stages. We've got some really good work going on the areas that are up on the slide, but it's not that it isn't happening in all areas. We've received additional funding to progress the work in Latham, and we've had a couple of really good workshops over the last few weeks in Highland Perthshire with a real focus on tackling child poverty. Really good feedback from the teams, and I think some really good work, and the additional resources and capacity agreed at Council 2 weeks ago, as I say, will really help us in terms of progressing this really important work. And finally, the last slide just gives a wee bit of a brief overview in terms of some of the budget motions and budget decisions through Council a couple of weeks ago, and I think just again underlines that kind of real council commitment to really tackling this really important issue. We signed off our corporate plan. Poverty was there as one of our key priorities. One of our key commitments through our financial strategy is to ensure that we are lining our resources to where they are needed most. And I think you'll see from all of the areas on the slide there that commitment has been absolutely well and truly sort of made across all elected members at Council a couple of weeks ago. So we'll be progressing much of this work, and we will give updates again in terms of how the funding is spent, the reach and impact and the difference that it's making. Sorry, that was quite a whistle-stop tour.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? That's good. If there are no questions then, thank you, Claire. Thank you very much for that presentation. We've got copies of it already, so people will be able to look at it in more detail if they wish. That brings us to the end of the business of this agenda. I thank everybody for your attendance today and for all the great contributions that we had, the great questions and comments. Now formally close the meeting.